lecture within our open masterclass series within economics. And we picked a topic which hopefully, topic is the next slide, generated some interest. By the way, if you are interested to follow up on anything in the talk today, then I would direct you to my personal webpage. The slide is somewhere here. Nobody can read that. I just quickly maybe write this on the whiteboard. www.geraldpeck.net. Okay. It's basically the same name of the webpage as my first name, just with the extension NET. So I'm going to put, I have already put the lecture slides there, and well, there's a kind of very rudimentary working paper version as well. So you may want to have a look at that if you want to. Wait for an update. Right, all these sorts of materials you find there on the first page. Okay, now the talk today is about, I call it the customs union game. That's quite topical. And it's of course here about the Eurasian customs union. Eurasian customs union that, I'm getting a little lost here with all these things here to handle. Eurasian customs, that was not the right direction, was launched in July 2010, so with some exceptions. Was more or less completed and 1 year later. Between Belarus, Kazakhstan, and Russia. At that time, Kyrgyzstan was expected to be the next country to join. Tajikistan further on the list, but Tajikistan was not joined unless Kyrgyzstan is joined. As everybody who is familiar with the geography of the region will recognize that there's no land border between Tajikistan and any other member country of the customs union. Well, maybe actually Kyrgyzstan is going to be overtaken over Armenia, but okay, that's yet to be seen. Okay, so that's basically the institution background of the talk. And I initially would have just given a talk about well, the timing of the emergence of the customs union. The timing, meaning the question, well, why was Kyrgyzstan in the second round of enlargement, not in the first round? Now this has moved to the second half of this talk. And the first half of this talk is now really devoted to some terminology and some definitions which normally wouldn't be the most exciting things to talk about, but because the political landscape has changed, now I think simple definitions like what is a customs union in comparison to a free trade area or free trade agreement now have really become questions of literally war and peace. Okay, so that's why we want to start with basically what's the difference between a free trade agreement and between a customs union. So free trade agreements are essentially agreements where the parties involved decide between them to abolish tariffs and non-tariff barriers between the members. Each country still continues to have their own tariff regime against any third country which is not a member of the agreement. So examples of that, NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Association, CIS FTA, that's basically the free trade area, which now, since 2011, finally makes up all the whole region of the former Soviet Union, essentially. Now this has been in existence already for some time in a rudimentary form, more like my working papers. So that's was really finalized and completed only very recently. But in most of the CIS area, there was actually a free trade regime in place already for some time. So we have to keep that in the back of our minds. Okay, what's the main problem with free trade agreements? Well, many of the problems that you have with free trade agreements, you also have with customs unions. But what is particular about free trade agreements, a particular concern is really the third country imports. Right? What is related to what we call trade deflection. So, in a free trade area, imports from the rest of the world would typically want to enter through the country with the lowest tariff in that area. So in the former CIS, or in the CIS area, that country used to be Kyrgyzstan. Kyrgyzstan, the only member of the World Trade Organization, had particular low tariffs for trade with the outside world, and a big part of the Kyrgyz economy was the re-import trade. Basically, people imported things from China and then basically took it to the other parts of the CIS region. Okay, and generally, typically, in free trade areas, other countries try to protect themselves against that sort of third country imports. So normally, within a free trade area, you still have border controls. So you notice, presumably, that within the CIS region, there were still border controls. So in Kyrgyzstan and Kazakhstan, there were border controls that still are in place. Right. Never mind that still on some hidden paths, all these imports from Kyrgyzstan still managed to enter the rest of the CIS region. Because the border controls might be particularly strict and effective. But anyway, they were there. Okay, just to get you an idea, plastic idea of what is going on, I've just put here, well, these are bricks of a wall. Not chocolate bars, as my wife was suggesting. Here we have Russia, and Russia has here its tariff barrier, which in Russia, we have Kazakhstan and we have Belarus here, so these are the three countries which now form the Eurasian Customs Union. Of those countries, Russia had the highest tariff barrier, so the bricks are here the largest. So Belarus, about the same magnitude, slightly less, and the Kazakhstan had rather small tariff barrier in the past. Okay, so if those three countries had decided to arrange their trade relationships via a free trade agreement, essentially what would have happened is that they would have here removed, right? So the tariff barrier between those countries. As I said, in the CIS region, they were mainly gone already before the customs union was there. Okay, now what the problem with that is, we said it's third country imports. So if there's no other obstacle here within the free trade area, then third country imports would of course want to enter through the smallest wall, okay, where the wall is lowest. First I should show you that actually we have free trade between those countries. And, okay, so that's now Turkey in that case. So what do we want to do if Russia still is concerned that it actually wanted to have free trade with Kazakhstan and not with Turkey? Well, in that case, Russia would need to put up some sort of customs control between between Kazakhstan alternatively then, you would have an incoming flow stream of imports through Belarus, which has slightly lower tariff barriers than Russia. Okay, so presumably Russia would want to defend it as well. Okay, so our lesson really is that normally within a free trade area, we typically have still border controls. Now, customs union. Customs union basically abolishes all tariffs and non-tariff barriers. This basically, we can talk about it later. And it has a common tariff which is applied to third countries. Okay. So unlike the previous picture where we have all these bricks of different size, in the customs union all the bricks in the end will all have the same size. I'll try to illustrate it as well. Okay. So it's equally protected. There's no longer any incentives for trade deflection. Okay. All countries basically look the same for exporter in a third country. The third country actually should be a fourth country, not in the customs union. Okay, that means within the customs union area you have now intensifying trade, okay, and trade from outside the customs union would then be basically deterred. Okay, the customs union has basically a trade creation effect. The customs union partners tend to trade more intensively because of the reduction of the tariff and non-tariff costs of trade. Now, we wouldn't have expected that effect to be particularly strong because, as I said, where the Eurasian customs union now is, there was essentially a sort of free trade area already in place before that. But what we have actually observed is that within the small customs union, trade was quite intensifying over the last 3 years already. Okay, then we have a trade diversion effect. As barriers to imports from third countries increase, right, producers within the customs unions are at an advantage. Now, that's a particular effect thing about the Eurasian customs union, that tariffs to the outside world really weren't lowered to the smallest common denominator, so to say, but all the tariffs were basically raised to the essentially to the pre-customs union Russian level, which meant a quite considerable increase for tariffs for places like Kazakhstan. So, in the formation of customs union, what we are going to observe is that there are going to be winners and losers. The winners, typically, within a customs union are the countries which are most industrialized. Now, the prediction for that Eurasian customs union would have been then that Belarus, which is the most industrialized country of the three, would be the big winner. And if we now look at data, it actually looks that way. Whilst there are also losers, one of the losers seems to be Kazakhstan. Kazakhstan, and right, we come to the issue of how to measure winners, how much a country wins and how a country loses. Well, the popular perception of what makes a winner and a loser is that the countries who actually are more successful in extending their exports to the customs union area would be the winners. And right, in the countries who then run deficit without the other customs union members are the losers. And economic theory, well, can tell a long story about it, but a short story essentially is that yes, that's actually also what economists think. And the second thing, what particularly consumers in Kazakhstan now concerns is well, that their consumption possibilities are negatively affected by that increase in the tariff barriers that Kazakhstan now sees. And here, so how well consumers are off after the formation of the customs union would be the second indicator of whether a country is a loser or a winner. And like Germany, Japan, obviously, the cars, the streets of our market. But we think that's probably hit us as a loss. Economists would agree with that. And Kazakhstan, in both accounts, would have been, but on the second account, we would have thought Kazakhstan must be a loser. On the first account, we now can actually see that Kazakhstan tends to lose out as well. We probably could have predicted it as well, because we were saying, well, the most industrialized country here, Belarus, would be a winner relative to the others. And now we see, well, Kazakhstan probably more like the bottom of the pile than the All right, just for my Kyrgyzstan story, Kyrgyzstan would have been a loser had it entered at the first instance. Why Kyrgyzstan? Well, Kyrgyzstan was in particular enjoying a low tariff area to the outside world. Much of its industry depended on that, on the region for the industry. Now, they would have lost that if they had joined the customs union in the first instance, but unfortunately, they are also a loser now that they are outside of the customs union. These are losers in comparison to what went before the setup of the customs union. Because now, basically, they can't so easily export their stuff into the region, Kazakhstan, Russia, and so on. Okay, so Kyrgyzstan basically, for them is basically a lose-lose game. Whatever would have happened, it's not very good in Kyrgyzstan. And we're going to use that argument later on. Okay, now, I said it's actually a matter of war and peace. And now we have really to think hard about the relationship between customs union and free trade blocs, or the relationship between free trade agreements and customs unions. And you're going to see immediately why that is now such an important issue. Let me first of all say customs union and free trade blocs can in principle coexist. Okay. Remember that free trading countries still have their border controls intact. And right, so with those border controls, basically they can still themselves trade with some customs union, and with other countries basically can trade on their own terms. And examples why that works is basically CIS-FTA and the EurAsian customs union, so that's a setup which works. So Armenia at the moment just, well, what would Armenia at the moment do? It might import from third countries, but all that things that is imported from third countries before it can be imported on into Russia, right, basically that would have to be declared at the customs border. Right, while things directly produced in Armenia would directly enter because of a free trade agreement. Okay, so in the long term, and that it works, that also history shows, we had in Europe the EFTA, European Free Trade Association, coexisting with the European Union for very long, actually having also then putting up free trade agreements with the European Union. Okay, so that works. The second question, could one country engage in free trade with two customs unions? Okay, the graph. Okay, now we see the country to which is already referred, Ukraine. European Union and Ukraine is still separated by one of those small walls, bricks, and Ukraine and Eurasian customs union is separated by similar. Now, Ukraine in principle could have a free trade agreement with Europe, right? So it would export and import to Europe, import from Europe, and it would have, can have a free trade agreement with the Eurasian customs union, Union Common Law. Border controls would just make sure that there's not a direct flow from Europe into Eurasian customs union. Okay, so that would have to be declared. Some principle of origin would have to be applied. That might be fluid in some places, but okay, would in principle work. Okay, so the answer is why not? As long as the origin principle is enforced. Now, second case, okay, now it gets a bit more tricky. Could one country like Ukraine do free trade with one customs union another customs union, like Eurasian customs union. Okay. And you see that was basically then the point of disagreement somewhat in November when Ukraine was about to sign the free trade agreement with the European Union, and then it was basically told that by the Russian president that it wouldn't be a very good idea to do that. What was the problem there? Okay, if that construction had come into effect and at a later point Ukraine were to join the Eurasian Customs Union, the problem would have been, well, by the way, joining the Eurasian Customs Union would now mean that green ribbon here that now encompasses here Ukraine and Eurasian Customs Union. This is now one block, and we just have one brick left in place that's between the European Union and Ukraine, but that of course now would be circumvented by a free trade agreement. Okay, so now all sorts of products could go from Ukraine into the European Union, attractive agricultural producers, to have to face a lowering of the European tariffs. Tariff for agricultural products was particularly high. But the other way around, the European Union could export to Ukraine, and all those products could directly go into, well, Eurasian customs union because there's no longer border control within one customs union. Okay, so we would say that sort of construction would be rather difficult unless we say that the Eurasian customs union want to free trade with Europe. Well, at some point the Russian president of course said, well, ultimately he envisages sort of a free trade area from Lisbon to Vladivostok. But at the moment that's not right now so much on the cards. And directly, if you had any doubts about that, then the president of the European Commission, that's Barroso, said, well, that sort of construction cannot be. Well, he said a country that joins a customs union basically gives up its free trade, its own responsible for its own trade policy. Therefore, if you want to free trade with Europe, you can't at the same time be in a customs union with Eurasian customs. Okay. Would there have been a way out other than with what we then have seen? Well, in principle, maybe yes. And there are some things that not really proper examples at the moment, but things that have been brought up in a debate. Like there could maybe be some sort of a second-class membership for customs union where you still have border controls within the customs union. At the moment, it looks very much, well, to some, I can't say at the moment what the outcome is going to be, but at the moment it looks like that would be the final outcome between the Eurasian Customs Union and Kyrgyzstan, because people in Kyrgyzstan observe that the border controls are rather intensifying between Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan, and there's also sorts of new border facilities in place now. You do that if you expect to have no border controls in a year's time. That's not a big question, but that's also a little bit of speculation. And we could also, so that might be on the cards, and we could also think of other examples that we may have to face in the near future, which is what if Britain would leave the European Union? If that happened in 2017 following a referendum organized by the Conservative Party, if it's still in power then? What about Ireland? Ireland is actually a member of the Customs Union, of the European Union, but it's also, since the 1920s, a member of a free trade area with Britain. Common market area. So free travel, free trade, and all that. And a similar thing about even, I think that referendum is even closer, even though the prospect seems even more distant. What if Scotland would declare independence and then at a later point rejoin the European Union? Then Scotland only trade with Germany but no longer with England, Okay, so some sort of constructions could presumably come up, but then Weber also said no. And then what Putin said, you know. Okay, so that's basically here why at the moment we could really say the way you set up your free trade agreements or customs union, that really has huge implications for how states and peoples are getting along. So let me then just move on to the second part of the talk. I said, well, what was originally the main part of the talk was really the dynamics of economic integration, and that now may also be interesting for sorts of reasons for Kazakhstan. Also, even though originally that had more focus on Kyrgyzstan's case. Okay, the question here is, which is the logic behind the timing of customs union formation? Okay, to take it back, that was a question where Russia, Belarus, and Kazakhstan had agreed on forming their customs union. They basically moved ahead, they went ahead. And other countries that originally actually had been members of parties to all the talks about setting up a customs union, the Dushanbe Agreement, members like Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, at the time of Uzbekistan. So they were not really then in the first round. And the question is, well, what actually determines whether a country is in the first round or not? And is there anything then, is there any logic behind that? Is there anything that makes living countries more willing to join in a second round? And would that willingness actually be exploited by some designer of that whole customs union setting up process? Okay, so that's basically the question. Why was Eurasian customs union founded in one step? And there could essentially be a number of reasons for that. Well, one is that with customs union, we said there are winners and losers, who ultimately setting up a customs union is also, to some extent, it's always a political decision as well. And politicians may find that is a good idea or a bad idea. So the perceived benefits of political decision makers could be quite different, and it could change over time. In Kyrgyzstan, we had also an example where the will of political decision maker changed because in 2010, Bakhtiar, I think, the then president of Kyrgyzstan, was removed from office in sort of something that bordered also on civil unrest, bordered on civil war. Did I say that? Bakir. Okay, sorry. Bakir. So he was removed from office. He was more skeptical about setting up the Eurasian customs union, but still a member or party to the Dushanbe Agreement. Okay, so the perceived political benefits of political decision makers could change over time, or I think the political decision makers themselves could change. Then the other thing is customs unions involve some sort of institutional structures that is need to agree on some set of rules, also on physical infrastructure maybe. Well, depending on if you just have to tear down border controls, that's more easily done if you have to set up something in addition, maybe between Kyrgyzstan and China, or even between Kyrgyzstan and Kazakhstan. That's then a different matter, and that takes time to build. And finally, the thing that I really want to focus here is there could be some sort of momentum building up by the creation of a core customs union, and we're going to show how that sort of momentum will play out. There's also a sort of historical precedent of customs union formation in a number of steps. Well, one precedent I could point to would be the European Union, because that wasn't created in one step. But more interesting maybe even is another example of customs union formation. This is the Zollverein, so our more unfamiliar ground, where the German accent actually merged into proper German Zollverein. Okay. That's the German, the customs union, which was made up of, at that time, independent German-speaking states in the 19th century. And ultimately, that sort of German customs union, since the early 19th century, then resulted in German nation. So that was, under that perspective, particularly successful and long-lasting. That was founded, Zollverein was founded in 1833 between independent German states. Basically, it started all with an initiative by Prussia. So, Prussia, okay, that's this here. Prussia is basically the huge territory in the north of Germany, with Berlin at the time in its center. The most powerful of those German states at the time. And they basically pushed for economic integration, first of all, of their own territory, which extended from the Polish border, there was Poland at the time, up really to the western border with Holland. Okay, so it was a huge area with some gaps in between, and they basically started to integrate that in the first place in 1819. And smaller German states by then experienced negative impact on their trade with the emerging union. Why? They learned a trade diversion effect. As the members of the union trade more intensively with each other, countries from outside the union basically then come playing second fiddle and will be then successful when trading with members of the union. And so one after the other of the smaller German states joined. All right, here we have, by the way, a graph. And some of the names here sound funny to me, but okay. You see, in the beginning we had basically here that landmass. That's Russia. Okay. Here we have now some. In the south, there was basically a competing customs union set up by Baden-Württemberg and Bayern. That didn't last very long. So it was really made, basically set up in response to the Prussians of their intensifying their integration of their lands. And then there was also a Central German Customs Commercial Union. Finally, an important step really in then finally integrating the whole thing into one customs union came when Prussia here persuaded the Duke of Hesse-Kassel to join. Okay. We have to say in Hesse-Kassel at the time there was also a sort of civil unrest because that negative trade effect really hit the local economy quite hard. The Duke then resigned and he basically passed on the baton to the younger Duke, the successor, and the successor then turned out to be much more willing really, to join the customs union. So that's a rather sort of interesting aspect of that. And when after then they could close this corridor really between north and south, then soon after that, Bavaria and Württemberg would also join that customs union. Then it had basically the sort of critical mass. Well, let me just add one thought, and it's really just a footnote here. But I think it's also an interesting footnote because you had here really that one leading state within these different independent German states being the driving force behind the creation of the Zollverein. And the question is, well, why was Prussia so interested in that? Because Prussia actually did not gain that much from trading with the smaller states. While it had a huge effect, the building of the customs union, on the smaller states, but it presumably had not such a huge effect on Prussia itself. So one answer is that Prussia did that in order to gain a better bargaining position with other really big players. And for Russia at the time really were England and France. Okay, so England at the time decided corn laws introduced, which basically prohibited the import of any agricultural products in times where there just was not a famine, okay, unless they were really desperate for imports of agricultural produce, they wouldn't allow anything. So they introduced that, and other things that Prussia would like to export was some sort of timbers, wood, essentially. Okay, so Prussia was basically hit by all sorts of protective measures by England, and thought, well, the English, of course, would like to sell all their industrial products somewhere to smaller German states. They would normally say, you know, have to get those. By being bigger here, and by also integrating those smaller German states into their customs union, putting them behind the same protective barrier as Prussia himself wanted to put itself, Prussia increased its bargaining power compared to those other players. And that is one of the reasons why people say that it actually made some sense for Prussia really to move ahead in forming the German customs union. Okay, but back to our question. What creates momentum? What creates momentum? Well, we have seen here the trade diversion effects really in the Zollverein customs union created really incentives for smaller states to join the bigger union. So they saw the trade balance deteriorate with the union, more willing to join. And the same now, it's actually at the moment happening in Kyrgyzstan. So Kyrgyzstan now has become more and more willing to join the customs union. That here is just the exports. Okay. The exports from Kyrgyzstan to CIS countries, basically after 2010, from 2009 to 2010, that's how we read it. Kyrgyzstan's exports to CIS countries was slightly increasing in 2010, then it was going down. 2010 was basically half of the year, it was still not a customs union. The following year, 2011, it had already decreased by 10%, and on top of that, in 2012, it decreased another 10%. Exports from Kyrgyzstan into other CIS countries. And the blue line, basically, that here is basically the green line, just looking at other CIS countries, and the blue line is now really the difference of how much Kyrgyzstan is worth in export to other CIS countries compared to other CIS countries. Okay, and right, okay, working very well. Right. Okay, the exports are just one part of the picture, but that was basically the data that was more easy for us to get. I mean, presumably, not much import is now taking place from changing from the rest of the Union into Kyrgyzstan. Okay, now having recognized that Kyrgyzstan basically sees its trade balance deteriorating, that was the indication here, the rest of the Union. Now, how could that sort of effect actually be used by another country actively when to decide whether to offer Kyrgyzstan in the first round participation in the customs union or second round participation in the customs union? Okay. So, okay, deep down into the realms of economics now. We assume, right, economists always like to assume something. Assume there's a leading, but that assumption is actually not too far-fetched. Assume there's a leading country, such as Russia. You can choose whether to offer Kyrgyzstan immediate membership or second round membership. What do they want to do? But a leading country would be aware, wouldn't it, that Kyrgyzstan needs to be maybe compensated if they were to join, so that to make sure that Kyrgyzstan is not worse off as before. You know, Russia in some ways seems to have recognized that. At the moment, we see many infrastructure projects within Kyrgyzstan, which are basically financed by Russia. There's some sort of electricity generation, that sort of thing. Okay, so somehow there's a recognition that Kyrgyzstan needs to be compensated, but the question is how much? Now, Kyrgyzstan, as a loser in the customs union, would probably have needed compensation when joining the first round. But now, it also loses, of course, by staying out. So we could say then, well, once it has realized its losses that it would have incurred anyway, getting in or getting out, but it incurred its losses whilst it was still staying out, then in the end it will be probably be more willing to join for less. Okay, so you would say probably Kyrgyzstan would be willing to accept less favorable terms of entry in a second round, seeing what damage it does, not to be in a customs union than they would have asked for in the first round. Okay, and that could then essentially persuade any sort of designer of the customs union formation process that it might be a wise idea not to offer really first round membership. Okay, economists also not only love making assumptions, they also love putting all that their thoughts in some sort of a diagram. Okay, so in the next diagram, we just to hit at home, we measure the wealth of Kyrgyzstan and Russia. On two axes, and we call that wealth of Kyrgyzstan, we call it W here, and the wealth of Russia W Rus. I will further assume the different membership arrangements are different advantages for Kyrgyzstan and Russia, and we come to that. And we also for that assume that there's actually a trade-off now, that was maybe what is particularly good for Russia might not be so good for Kyrgyzstan and vice versa. That's what a trade-off is. Well, if it's equally good for both of them, then I think we'll probably agree on it anyway. Trade-offs are really interesting. And, right, as I promised, here, two axes. So here we have the wealth of Kyrgyzstan, here the wealth of Russia. Now assume that our status quo ex ante. Here comes with W naught Rus for Russia and W naught here for Kyrgyzstan. And there would now be one point, A, we could call that. That would have been my immediate entry solution, basically giving Kyrgyzstan immediately full access to this customs union market and compensate for all the losses that they have. So in that case, they would have agreed easily to that. Okay, so you see basically point A makes really sure that Kyrgyzstan is as well off as before. And who would have needed to assure that? Well, of course, the guy who decides now the customs union is also willing to maybe to make some transfers to Kyrgyzstan in the form of infrastructure projects and the like. Okay. Now, assume that core customs union actually hits Kyrgyzstan quite a bit now. Okay, so that's the situation that we now see. Kyrgyzstan at the moment is actually worse off than its status quo ante. Russia should be more or less happy with having a customs union for whatever reason, because it has political benefits or because they trade more intensively with each other. Okay, we just note now what Russia's welfare is at the moment and what Kyrgyzstan's welfare is at the moment. That's what sort of aggregate picture. Whether Russia is now better or worse off than with immediate access, that doesn't make much of a difference. But the assumption really that Kyrgyzstan is worse off with this than with the status quo ante, or also worse off with what it would have needed to be given in order to be willing to accede immediately. So that assumption is crucial, because now you can say that you see, or you don't see, now this shaded, this area here is the shaded area, and you don't see that. So this area now comes with a shade, and the shade is either visible. See that a bit? Things to see. Okay, we never tried it in the big lectures together. Okay, you could imagine now, well, point B would be full access to the EU market, somewhat less compensation, but compensation still. But also think of maybe some other solution which might even be more attractive for Russia if you think of well, a second-class membership. Some sort of border controls between Kyrgyzstan and Russia still in place. Maybe not so nice for Kyrgyzstan, but maybe more interesting for Russia if they believe that the Kyrgyz will never really manage to close the maybe more porous borders to other bordering states. So that they couldn't really completely suppress imports from China or maybe other countries that are bordering Kyrgyzstan. Okay, so if that were on the cards, and say there's some speculation in the press that might be what is eventually coming up, but we don't know. We could now say, well, look, these sorts of points, Kyrgyzstan presumably wouldn't have wanted to agree to that if they had been asked, whilst they were still enjoying their status quo ante, whether they wanted to join or not. They would have wanted to accept that because B gets them less than W not here, and C also does. Okay. But both points might be quite attractive to Russia. After forming the core customs union, they are also attractive to Kyrgyzstan because all the damage basically by forming the customs union already has been done. Okay, Detroit. Died. Okay, so the momentum argument actually to some extent, I'm not really sure that this explains everything and that much. And the working paper gives more detail about what second thoughts you may want to have. But I think the momentum argument helps to understand what process, what could determine the process of customs union formation. And yeah, so you could say there might be some logic behind that, why Kyrgyzstan did not join in the first place. But again, 2010, many other things happened in Kyrgyzstan. It might just have been a matter of really timing as well. But that we now see Kyrgyzstan is increasingly willing to join. Okay, in the main bazaar in Kyrgyzstan, or in Bishkek, I think there's still the opinions is split. So traders obviously otherwise you're not articulate about joining customs union. But it seems like they're increasingly happy to join. And under which conditions further is yet to be seen. Okay. So that's, I think, the more original contribution of the talk, of our paper. There are other dynamic aspects of interest as well. So dynamics, really, how things develop over time. One would be, and we can't really follow that up in too much detail, does the customs union lead to ever deeper integration? We have already seen some examples where it does, or the European Union started off with the customs union, hasn't integrated so and so far. Well, the German customs union, resulting nation, Italian customs union, by the way, or at the same time, Italy was similarly a mess, but a collection of rather small states, small independent states in the 19th century. The Piedmont, the French-speaking region, the And still it started basically with the customs union as well, but I can't say too much about that yet. Okay, so the European Union certainly has experienced ever deeper integration. One reason why that might be, I mean, certainly in Germany, Italy, there might have been all sorts of other driving forces behind it, not exclusively economic maybe, but what probably to some extent has driven the integration of the European Union is really the fact that, remember that there were winners and losers when you create a customs union. So if there are losers, they need to be compensated, is that. Now how can this be done? Well, one is really by maybe make a one-off monetary transfer, that's normally how economists think that compensation takes place. Or maybe by putting up some infrastructure projects that the using country would like to have. But that's at least, I would say, not really credible in the long run. Well, you do it once and then the country joins, and then well, how can you enforce really that this sort of transfer is going on for a long time? Right. An alternative might be that you bargain, you continue bargaining, not just about things like border regimes, about non-tariff barriers, common standards for the products that you trade, but you have maybe more institutions, labor market institutions, common rules, and we negotiate about that sort of institutions. That basically brings us to something like a Eurasian economic community. Well, the other thing is, of course, you have a common budget. That's what the European Union essentially got. We sort of, first of all, agricultural funds that could be distributed then to the various, not the member states, but to the farmers in the different countries. Ultimately, and later then, when a new set of countries was to join in the south, that were basically not really fitting into this agricultural distribution system. They were producing less wheat, but more things like olives and stuff like that. You want to have the same system there, repeated of olives that has also criticized the other products. Then you had some sort of regional funds introduced. Regional funds that were particular supporting infrastructure projects in these different countries. For that, European Union then had some sort of common budget. Okay. Next step then, well, presumably Europe is not going to do the next step in the foreseeable future, and Eurasian Customs Union, Economic Union, presumably also not, but the next step would, logical step, would at some point have been invasion. You see that Germany and Italy eventually did that step, and others did not. Okay, so that was basically all here. I have a list with some further readings. Now I have some of KIMEP insiders here, students, staff, and you would be able to access also that and many other things, but these are all things here that I've put that are also accessible for people who do not really have access to a library. Working papers and the like, or the Google Books, they're all freely accessible on the internet. Don't have to write them down. Basically all the materials really is also on my personal web page, journalpack.net. And right, I think, right, when I talk about winners and losers of customs union information, what was I actually referring to? I don't want to bring it up in the discussion in which I turned here to start and finish with. Right. You have a former, you know well, here at KIMEP, from Rakos. Right, and my own working paper together with Ali Bekov and Pedro Marmarov. As I said, it's still a little bit of a mess, but we're working on it. And last but not least, the commercial break. Commercial break.